Beloved, hear me. In every generation, there are men and women ordained by God to rise, to shine, to carry a mandate that shifts territories, families, and nations. But destiny is never lost in a single moment. It is stolen slowly, quietly, skillfully through the power of distraction. Many people are not defeated because they lack potential. They are defeated because their attention has been captured by the wrong pursuits. And while they are busy chasing shadows, their crown is quietly slipping away. There is a crown placed upon your life, an assignment, a purpose, a responsibility that heaven is counting on you to fulfill. But the tragedy of destiny is that you can carry a great calling and still miss it, simply because your eyes wandered from what truly matters. In every season of lifting, there are traps waiting, subtle enough to go unnoticed, but deadly enough to remove a man from relevance forever. Tonight, I want you to listen with your spirit. There are two dangerous traps that have robbed many of their mandate. Two forces that, if not confronted, can silence even the most anointed, the most gifted, the most sincere. This is not just a message, it is a wake-up call. A reminder that your destiny is too precious to be toyed with. Your assignment too urgent to be delayed. Your crown too valuable to be stolen. May your heart be open. May your spirit be alert. And may the light of God expose every distraction that seeks to steal your crown. The journey begins now. Distractions are one of the most underestimated weapons against a person's destiny. Not because they shout loudly, but because they whisper silently. They come softly, wrapped in things that look harmless, familiar, or even necessary. This is why so many people fail to recognize when their lives are being gently steered away from what truly matters. No one wakes up and suddenly loses their purpose. It is stolen in small pieces through the slow and steady erosion of focus. And the most dangerous distractions are not the ones you instantly identify as wrong, but the ones that make you feel comfortable while quietly draining your strength. These are the subtle things that seem like they pose no threat, yet they gradually shift your gaze from what God has instructed you to pursue. Many people assume distraction is simply about wasting time or being busy with unproductive things. But distraction can also be a good thing that appears in the wrong season. It can be an opportunity that looks promising but was not ordained for you. It can be a relationship that is not sinful, yet slowly pulls your heart away from discipline, consecration, and clarity. It can even be a responsibility that seems important but was never assigned to you. The greatest battle of greatness is the battle for attention, because whatever captures your deed, attention eventually captures your destiny. The enemy does not need to destroy a person if he can distract them long enough. By the time they look back, years have passed and their energy, hunger, and sensitivity have faded. Sometimes distraction takes the form of inner noise, overthinking, emotional turbulence, unnecessary comparisons, the pressure to impress people, or the fear of missing out. These invisible forces can pull a person so far from their core assignment that they begin to pursue what others expect rather than what God has designed. Destiny is fragile and it requires a protected environment to grow. Every time you allow your attention to be scattered, something within you begins to lose alignment. The whispers of God become faint. The conviction that once burnt in your heart begins to diminish. The spiritual senses that once guided you become dull. And before long, you are living a life that is busy, yet barren, active, yet unproductive, surrounded by movement, but devoid of progress. Distraction also manifests through the appetite of the flesh, comfort, pleasure, entertainment, and the constant desire to escape discomfort. People don't realize how much destiny is lost in moments of carelessness. A 5-minute decision can rob a person of 5 years of progress. A single habit entertained long enough can deform the discipline needed to build a meaningful future. Many people pray for greatness but fail to protect the environment in which greatness is born. A distracted man cannot carry the weight of any serious assignment. A distracted heart cannot hear divine instruction. A distracted mind cannot birth anything significant. Another subtle form of distraction comes through the voices you allow into your life. Counsel, conversations, social media, friendships, and influences. They can gradually shift your focus without you noticing. Not every voice is evil, but not every voice is aligned with your path. Destiny requires selective hearing. When you listen to too many directions, you lose your direction. When you surround yourself with people who do not understand your calling, their opinions can drown the voice of God in your life. You begin to question what God already confirmed, doubt what God already settled, and delay what God already instructed. Distraction can also appear disguised as urgency. You may find yourself responding to every demand, every call for attention, every crisis, every responsibility, until your life becomes reactive instead of intentional. The enemy loves to keep a person busy but ineffective. When your days are filled with noise, you lose the stillness needed to receive clarity. And without clarity, even good efforts become misaligned efforts. A distracted person can work hard and still remain behind, because destiny is not only built by strength, but by accuracy of focus. There are people whose destinies were altered not because they sinned deeply, but because they drifted slowly. They underestimated the cost of losing focus. They allowed their minds to be pulled in many directions until their spiritual sensitivity became weak. Destiny rarely collapses dramatically. It fades gradually when a person stops watching over their heart. Every calling requires vigilance, and every crown requires protection. When you do not guard your attention, the enemy does not need to fight you. You fight yourself through misplaced priorities and scattered energy. The truth is, destiny demands sacrifice. It demands the courage to say no to things that feel good but do not build you. It demands the wisdom to differentiate between activity and assignment. It demands the maturity to keep your eyes fixed on what matters, even when everything else screams for your attention. The crown upon your life is real. The mandate you carry is heavy, and the enemy knows he cannot stop a focused man, so he works tirelessly to distract him. A man who masters his focus masters his future. A man who conquers distraction preserves his crown. A man who protects his attention protects his destiny. The spiritual cost of losing focus is far greater than most people realize. When a person begins to drift away from their divine assignment, something within them starts to disconnect from the very source that empowers their destiny. Many people think losing focus is simply a matter of being distracted for a moment, but in the realm of purpose, focus is the pathway that connects a person to their mandate. Once that connection weakens, the grace, the inspiration, the urgency, and even the clarity that once guided them begins to fade. The danger is that this fading does not always happen dramatically. It happens quietly, slowly, and often without immediate consequences. A person may still look active, functional, even spiritual on the outside, while internally the fire that once drove them has reduced to a spark. Every divine assignment comes with a demand for attention, discipline, and intentionality. When you become careless with your own focus, you begin to mishandle the very instructions that preserve your destiny. God does not give people greatness so they can treat it casually. He gives assignments that require diligence, sobriety, and spiritual alertness. When focus is lost, instructions become suggestions. And when instructions are treated like suggestions, destiny becomes vulnerable to delay and destruction. Many people are living far below their potential, not because they lack gifting or opportunity, but because they have mishandled the weight of what was entrusted to them. There is a kind of spiritual erosion that takes place when focus is compromised. The things that used to convict you may no longer convict you. The practices that kept you spiritually sharp, prayer, worship, study, meditation, begin to feel optional. Sensitivity to God's leading becomes dull. You find yourself questioning what you used to be certain about hesitating in decisions you used to make boldly, and drifting into cycles you once escaped. Focus is not just about productivity, it is about protecting your spiritual environment. When the environment weakens, everything connected to your destiny begins to weaken with it. Losing focus also affects how a person perceives time. When you are aligned with your assignment, time feels purposeful. You can sense when a season is shifting, when God is nudging you, when a door is opening, or when you must remain still. But when focus is broken, time begins to lose its meaning. A person may spend weeks, months, or even years without realizing what they have wasted. They may engage in many activities, yet none of them carry the weight of purpose. They may feel busy, but their spirit knows they are drifting. This disconnection from divine timing is one of the most subtle yet dangerous consequences of losing focus. A person who cannot discern the seasons of their life becomes vulnerable to missing moments that may never return. Another cost of losing focus is that it opens the door for substitutes. When a person stops feeding what God gave them, other voices will begin to fill the silence. Influence is never neutral. If the voice of purpose becomes quiet, the voice of opinion will become loud. If the voice of the spirit becomes distant, the voice of comfort, compromise, and convenience will take its place. This is how people gradually shift from assignment to ambition, from calling to comparison, from obedience to performance. They start living for validation instead of instruction. They begin seeking opportunities instead of seeking alignment. The heart that once burned with purity becomes entangled with unnecessary weights. When focus is lost, relationships also begin to change. People who were once aligned with your purpose may drift away because your atmosphere has shifted. Likewise, people who have no role in your destiny may enter your life because the boundaries that once protected you have weakened. Destiny requires discernment, and discernment requires focus. When focus is compromised, you may embrace what God never sent and ignore what God placed right before you. The wrong relationship, conversation, or influence can deflate a person's passion and dilute their mandate without them realizing it. Another painful cost of losing focus is that your confidence in your calling begins to fade. When a person is aligned with their assignment, there is a boldness that comes from knowing they are where they are meant to be. But when focus drifts, doubt begins to rise. You start questioning if you are capable, worthy, ready, or even chosen. These doubts were always there, but focus kept them silent. When focus is broken, insecurity becomes loud. And once insecurity takes root, even the strongest person can begin to second guess what God has already affirmed in them. Confidence is not arrogance. It is the byproduct of clarity. When clarity is lost, confidence soon follows. Perhaps one of the deepest costs of losing focus is that it affects your ability to hear God clearly. God is always speaking, but we do not always have the stillness to listen. A distracted heart cannot receive precise instruction. A noisy mind cannot perceive divine prompting. A busy spirit cannot carry revelation. When focus is lost, hearing becomes guessing and direction becomes confusion. You begin moving based on emotion instead of guidance. You begin choosing based on pressure instead of purpose. And with every misaligned step, you drift further from the path you were meant to walk. The spiritual cost of losing focus is not always visible immediately, but it is always felt eventually. Purpose demands watchfulness. Destiny demands attention. What you fail to give focus to, you eventually lose the authority to steward. Every destiny carries a crown, a symbolic representation of the authority, purpose, and mandate placed upon a life. This crown is not made of earthly gold or jewels. It is a divine recognition that you have been entrusted with something eternal. Your crown is the proof that heaven has invested something within you that must be revealed upon the earth. It is the evidence that your life is not an accident, that your existence is not random, and that your journey carries weight far beyond what you see. When a person begins to understand the magnitude of this crown, they stop treating their life casually. They stop comparing themselves to others. They stop living as though every day is the same. They begin to recognize that their presence on the earth is tied to an assignment that carries eternal impact. A crown is not merely a symbol of status. It is the evidence of responsibility. When heaven places a crown on a person's life, it means that something has been placed within them that the world cannot manufacture. It is the wisdom, the gifting, the spiritual sensitivity, the resilience, the compassion, and the insight that equips them to fulfill their divine mandate. Every person, regardless of background or environment, carries a crown that reflects what God has deposited within them. Some people discover it early, others discover it later. Some ignore it, some bury it, others rise into it. But whether acknowledged or not, the crown remains a spiritual reality. This crown is also a reminder that destiny is not a casual journey. A person who carries a crown cannot live carelessly, speak carelessly, or choose carelessly. Decisions become heavier because every choice either strengthens or weakens the ability to walk in purpose. The crown upon a person's life requires a certain level of discipline, sacrifice, and alignment. It demands clarity, it demands intentionality, it demands focus. When you carry a crown, you do not have the luxury of living like everyone else. You cannot waste your years in confusion. You cannot allow your heart to be scattered. You cannot give yourself to every relationship, conversation, or environment. You must protect what you carry. Many people lose the weight of their crown because they do not understand its value. When you do not recognize the worth of something, you handle it casually. There are people who pray for greatness but mishandle the small instructions that lead to greatness. There are others who ask for influence but run away from responsibility. The crown is not given for decoration. It is given as a reminder of the divine expectations upon your life. It is heaven's way of saying you have been chosen for something bigger than yourself. And with that choosing comes the need to separate yourself from what is unnecessary, distracting, or destructive. A person's crown also represents authority. Not authority over people in the sense of dominance, but authority over the territory of influence assigned to them. Every destiny has a jurisdiction. For some, that jurisdiction is family restoration. For others, it is leadership, innovation, ministry, creativity, healing, nation shaping, or generational transformation. Your crown authorizes you to function effectively in that realm. It is the spiritual empowerment that allows your voice to carry weight, your actions to produce impact, and your presence to shift atmospheres. When a person carries a crown, even their weaknesses cannot cancel their calling. Their flaws may delay them, but the crown remains, waiting for alignment. This crown is also a reminder that you are part of a bigger eternal story. Your life is not just about survival or success, it is about stewardship. The crown symbolizes that heaven has entrusted something to you that must be protected, nurtured, and multiplied. There are people whose deliverance, transformation, or direction is tied to your obedience. Your crown affects more than just your own life. It influences the lives connected to your destiny. This is why losing the crown is not just a personal tragedy. It is a generational loss. When a person fails to walk in their mandate, someone else suffers. A generation remains without light. A territory remains without a voice. A family remains without direction. Another dimension of the crown is that it attracts both favor and warfare. Wherever there is a crown, there will be opposition. The enemy does not fight people without potential. He fights people with purpose. He attacks not because of who you are now, but because of who you are becoming. The crown upon your life makes you a threat to darkness. And this is why distractions, temptations, discouragement, and spiritual battles often intensify as you grow closer to your assignment. The presence of warfare often reveals the value of your crown. If your life seems heavily attacked, it is not because you are weak, it is because what you carry is strong. The crown also represents identity. It is the divine affirmation that you are who God says you are, not who people say you are. When this identity becomes clear, you stop living for approval. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces you've outgrown. You stop apologizing for the grace on your life. You begin to stand in the confidence that you were chosen, empowered, and set apart. This identity fuels boldness. It fuels resilience. It fuels endurance. When you know who you are, you stop negotiating with things beneath your destiny. Every crown requires alignment with divine purpose. It grows heavier when a person tries to live in contradiction to what God has called them to do. But when a person aligns themselves with their assignment through obedience, discipline, and spiritual sensitivity, the crown becomes a source of strength, clarity, and authority. The more you embrace your crown, the more you become who you were destined to be. There are traps in life that look harmless on the surface, but carry the power to permanently derail a person's divine journey, if not confronted with seriousness and spiritual sensitivity. These traps are not always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes they wear the disguise of comfort, convenience, opportunities, or relationships that appear harmless, yet slowly drain the strength, conviction, and clarity needed to walk in one's mandate. The tragedy is that most people do not fall because of a single catastrophic mistake. They fall because they underestimated small compromises that gradually pull them away from purpose. Destiny is delicate, and the path that leads to its fulfillment requires vigilance. The moment a person relaxes their guard, the traps that once seemed distant begin to appear more appealing, more justified, and more acceptable. Every person who carries a mandate will eventually encounter these traps. They are not unique to a certain group or level of spirituality. They are common to all who have something valuable to protect. A person who carries greatness must understand that the enemy does not always come with force. He comes with strategy. He studies weaknesses, patterns, desires, and vulnerabilities. He observes the moments when you are tired, discouraged, emotionally wounded, or spiritually dry. Those are the moments when traps often appear. They do not come with warning signs. They come subtly, wrapped in situations that make perfect sense to the human mind, but are misaligned with divine purpose. One of these traps is the lure of comfort and ease. When someone begins to rise or make progress, the